Step up to the plate in the incredibly real baseball simulation, World Class Baseball.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ultimate Turbografx 16 review here on Player 1 Start. Well, today's the day. This is the last video we're going to focus on the HuCard games with the Turbografx 16. And it has been a long time getting here, but we only have one more game genre to go through. So if this is your first time here, and you haven't seen the rest of them yet, you may want to go back and watch part 1 in this series first, and then go through the other games that we've looked at, because this one's going to kind of sum up the HuCard games with one more game genre.
Sports and racing games are universal to almost every single game console that has been released. And that may be due to the fact that most gamers do expect some of these games to be released on each system they own. Racing games would usually push the system to its limits, as especially in this time frame 3D graphics weren't really possible, so each system had to do its best to fake the 3D. And sports games were challenged with providing the most realistic experience each console could offer. At its launch year, the Turbografx 16 provided a respectable number of games, with around 2 racing games, a golf game, a baseball game, and a tennis game. But as expected, before the Turbografx 16 was done, it expanded its selection of sports games significantly.
Alright, let's go ahead and dive right in. So there are many different types of sports games that were released for this system, and we're going to focus on a few sports games at a time, basically going on a similar style on each section. The first ones we're going to focus on are the fighting games.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and pop in one of the games, fire up the Turbografx 16, and let's get started. Andre Panza Kickboxing was released for the Turbografx 16 in 1991. It was originally released in Europe in 1990 for various computers before being ported to the Turbografx 16 in North America. This is a kickboxing game that features black belt kickboxing masters. The object of the game is to win the kickboxing championship by defeating an array of kickboxing masters in a series of fighting matches. Despite being a relatively unknown game across all of its platforms, this game actually provides a good experience for those that are familiar with martial arts. This game will definitely test your stamina, as precise timing is needed to land blows against your opponent to be able to finally take them down. A prominent martial artist and actor stated in an interview that they believe this game, on the Super Nintendo, was the best fighting game purely from a martial arts technical point of view. Overall, my perception of this game is that it is fairly decent, but it would take way more time than I am willing to invest into this title to be able to get good at it. This game is relatively cheap on the Turbografx 16, but ports on other systems, where it's known as Best of the Best Championship Karate, are even lower than this, and I don't say it's necessary to play it on the Turbografx 16, so it's up to you whether or not you want to collect this one. Battle Royale is the only wrestling video game developed for the Turbografx 16, and it was released in 1990. And information about this game appears to be a bit scarce. It is a fairly standard wrestling game of the time period, and although it doesn't offer anything too impressive for the Turbografx 16, it isn't necessarily a bad game if you're just looking for a simplistic wrestling game to play with friends. However, I think the audience for this game, at least in modern days, is going to be limited to hardcore wrestling fans, and especially those that grew up in the 1990s. Other reviews of this game rank it at around 2.5 out of 5 stars, and I would say that's about right.
How hard can you hit? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Champions Forever Boxing is a boxing game licensed from the 1989 documentary about the sport of boxing, featuring the likenesses of 5 all-time greats, including Ali, Foreman, Frazier, Holmes, and Norton. Players can assume the role of any of the legendary boxers, or match up against them in the ring. The game includes single-player exhibition modes and career modes, as well as a 2-player versus mode, and strangely an autoplay mode, which sees the computer match up against itself in a demonstration. Career mode starts in 1968 and lasts up to 15 years, with 1 fight per year. This takes into account the actual historical standings of each of the featured boxers. In career mode, all the fights last 12 rounds, while in the other modes, the fights can be set between 3 and 12 rounds. Progress in career mode is stored via password, or through backup memory on the Turbografx 16, or with a Turbo Booster Plus. Again, I think this is only going to satisfy a niche audience today, mainly because it's going to appeal to most boxing fans that are aware of some of these boxing legends. I also feel this game is tough as nails, and I didn't get very far through it. Other reviewers gave it around 2.5 out of 5 stars, and again, I do agree with that review rating.
With these fighting games, none of them really left a strong impression with me. It was just a lot of mediocrity. There wasn't really one that was really necessarily terribly bad, but there wasn't one that was very good either. If I had to recommend one out of these titles, maybe it'd be Battle Royale, and that's on the stipulation that you're able to play it multiplayer. But that said, let's go ahead and take a look at tennis and volleyball games next.
Sonic Spike, known as World Beach Volley in Japan, is a volleyball video game released for the Turbografx 16 in 1990. In this game, you can choose a standard game or a tournament with several countries to choose from, like Japan, China, USA, and so forth. I find it a bit nostalgic when the USSR is still included, because it was still a thing when this game was released. I'll start off by saying that the music is really nothing to be excited about, and the graphics, even though they're a bit colorful in certain locations, get bland after a while, and with only 3 different court types to choose from, basically just varying in color, get boring very quickly as well. My biggest gripe with this game is that it's very difficult to play. Most of the time, I can't tell where the ball is going to end up, and if you play against the computer, they are always going to be better than you. Sadly, I just didn't have much fun with this title, so I can't really recommend it as one to collect, even though it won't necessarily break the bank to do so. Super Volleyball made its way to the Turbografx 16 in 1990, and in my opinion provides a much better experience than Sonic Spike. I like the flat, straight-on view perspective, other than the false 3D perspective that was very prominent. I am of course referring to the isometric point of view that Sonic Spike uses, and it really makes this game actually very playable. The visuals are nice and pleasing to the eye even still to this day, but the game is lacking in the sound department, having no soundtrack whatsoever, and only providing sound effects during gameplay. Volleyball has never really been the most popular sport, but if you're looking for one, I would definitely recommend this over Sonic Spike on the Turbografx. Davis Cup Tennis is a sports video game developed by Laura Seal in 1991 for the Turbografx, and this game follows the rules of tennis closely, with each match having a minimum of 5 sets by default. Players are able to control the difficulty of the AI before starting their game as well, and the player can choose either a quick play mode, which allows for a single tennis match, or they can play through the full Davis Cup, where the player must choose the team captain and compete through the entire tournament while working through the player rotation. This game is presented in the standard style that was common at the time, where they have 2-dimensional sprites, and the court is given a false 3D perspective. Overall, I didn't really find anything game-breaking, except for I did find it annoying that it doesn't really seem like I can control the power of how hard I hit, other than when serving the ball. Overall reviews would give this game around a 5 to 7 out of 10, and I would probably rest in the middle, giving this game about a 6 out of 10. While playing this game, I kept thinking that I'd rather be playing a more modern tennis game, likening to something like Virtua Tennis, which was a personal favorite of mine, and I really feel like that older tennis games have become very dated due to the limitations on these systems.
So again, not really a huge selection here either, but if I had to recommend one of these games, I would say the one I probably played the longest was Super Volleyball, the one with the front-on perspective without that pseudo 3D isometric perspective. I did have a lot more fun with that game because basically I can tell where the ball was going to land. The tennis game was okay, but I've already played another game that was actually pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and say and recommend that original launch title over this one. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the more popular sports games.
Hit the Ice is a hockey video game originally released by Taito in arcades in 1990. And like the arcade version, the Turbografx 16 port features a versus gameplay, where players can choose the same players available in the arcades and have them either play on the red or blue team. Unlike other ports that only feature 1 to 2 players, up to 4 players can join in on this game if a turbo tap is available. If playing as a single player, you are also responsible for controlling your teammate by calling for passes or shots, all while controlling your goalie as well. I think the visuals of this game are very impressive for this console, and I think they do a decent job of trying to port the arcade game to this system, though I think the sound is a bit to be desired as I found myself muting this game just to get through it. But for me, the gameplay of this game just seems to be a bit off. It feels like maybe they slowed down the pace of the game a little bit because it feels like it takes a while for me to get from one side of the rink to the other. And for some strange reason, it takes a long time to get through a 5-minute game of hockey. Every time the gameplay is stopped, as in normal hockey, it takes forever for the game to get going again. And for a conversion of an arcade sports title, I would expect the gameplay to be a bit more sped up. Otherwise, I can't really articulate what makes this game a bit more average than other ones that I've played, but considering there's only 2 hockey games to choose from on this system, I would say this is a decent game overall, and it may be worth a pickup for hockey fans or just fans of the Turbografx 16 in general. And in terms of TV Sports Hockey, which was also released on the Turbografx 16, I would say that Hit the Ice is much better than this game. This game seems to be plagued with infuriating controls and worthless AI. That's not to say this is one of the worst hockey games I've ever played, it's just not as good as Hit the Ice, and there's no reason to own both. And unfortunately, mediocrity and infuriating controls is actually something that plagues the TV Sports series. TV Sports Basketball actually features good graphics and audio for the system, however, I think that its control scheme is definitely overcomplicated. As I really couldn't get used to the control scheme used in this game, I can't really recommend it to others. Normally, I would say that this game would be reserved for those that were fans of the NBA at this time, but this game doesn't even have an NBA license. So it is very generic. Other people have given this game around a 5 out of 10. I would say it's down to a 3 out of 10, almost unplayable.
3 seconds.
Sadly, I didn't have much to say about TV Sports Football either. It is one of the more faithful adaptations of the game up until this time, but during a time where Tecmo Bowl and Madden was just coming onto the scene, this gameplay does again feel very dated, and nothing I really felt was too impressive, even on the Turbografx 16. For better or for worse, it is the only football game on HuCard for this system, and its controls are not as broken as the other games I've played in this series. But overall, I can't say that I had fun playing it. I would rank this one at about a 5 or a 6 out of 10.
Red 24. Red 24.
Again, the selection leaves something to be desired. Mediocrity seems to be the theme of the sports games on this system, and that's really can sum up sports games on a variety of systems, but the problem with the Turbografx is there just aren't that many titles to choose from, so when you don't have really a strong title that you can say, yes, this is one you definitely want to go back and play, it really lets them all kind of blend together. But these last few we're going to take a look at actually don't really correlate to each other, so let's just go ahead and take a look at these individually.
Jack Nicklaus's Turbo Golf is a golf simulation video game developed by Sculptured Software and originally published by Accolade beginning in 1988. It did receive ports to various systems under the name Jack Nicklaus's Greatest 18 Holes of Major Championship Golf, and it was released on various home computer systems as well as the 8-bit Nintendo Entertainment System. While the game only contains one course of 18 holes, the 18 holes are taken from various different golf courses, creating kind of a greatest hits reel for Jack Nicklaus's favorite. However, the Turbografx 16 HuCard version only includes one whole course from the Australian Golf Club. One thing I kept noticing is just how long holes take to load, as the loading process appears to take place in real time across the screen, and the viewpoint changes with virtually every shot, so you're stuck looking at the loading screens for quite a long time. I would say the average is you're looking at the loading screens more often than you are playing. My biggest complaint of this game has to be how the game controls. You have a swing meter that you have to get exactly right, or else your ball's going to go in any number of what seems like random directions. After trying for almost 2 hours to try to get a shot to go right, I was unsuccessful the entire time. The only time I could actually show what a shot is supposed to look like is when the computer would demo the course. And while the game would have been a definite visual upgrade from golf games on the 8-bit generation, I definitely feel that the playstyle kept me from enjoying this one as much as I could have. World Sports Competition, also known as Power Sports in Japan, is a sports video game developed by Misc Software for the PC Engine originally in 1992, eventually being ported to the Turbografx 16 soon after. This game centers around a Summer Olympics theme, including several events such as archery, rowing, shooting, swimming, and track and field. And that's about all I have to say about this game. It's okay, but I do feel that it is very dated, especially for these sporting events, and I would rank this at about a 6 out of 10. It is playable, I didn't really find anything game-breaking with it, but I didn't really have a lot of fun playing it. Ballistics made its way to the PC Engine in Turbografx 16 in 1991. It is a futuristic sport involving directing a puck to a goal by shooting small balls at it. In terms of the gameplay style, it kinda reminds me of air hockey, only a little bit different. And I will add, not as fun. To be honest, there's so much going on the screen at once, it is hard for me to tell what I am actually interacting with on the screen. Again, I played this for a while, I even looked up some strategies to it, and I kinda get how to play it, but it's just not very fun for me. It's way too fast-paced, and the screen makes me dizzy because of how fast it is scrolling up and down.
So yeah, not a good selection here either. If I were to rate all of the sports games on the Turbografx 16, I would really not recommend any of these games, at least the ones that I've shown in this video, unless you're going for a complete collection. The advantage of these games, at least in terms of collecting them, is they're not going to break the bank. Because they're not necessarily these high desirable titles, they're not going to be very expensive. But again, you're not going to get a lot of playtime out of these, other than letting them sit on the shelf, I guess. You know, that's going to be where the value comes from. But moving on from that, there aren't very many racing games either. We've already covered Chase HQ in the Ultimate Sega Genesis review, so I'm not really going to talk about that game a bit more. That, and for some reason, my copy is not working on the Turbografx, so the only thing I can show is the stock footage I have up here in the corner, which kind of gives you an idea of the graphics. The game, I assume, plays well. I've played it in an emulator, and it had the same controls. I'm not quite sure if the turbo buttons come into play on that game or not. But I'm not very good at that game, so I can't tell you whether or not it's better or worse than any of its other console counterparts. The one game I can take a look at, and it does work on this console, is Final Lap Twin, so let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Final Lap Twin actually falls under two categories, as a racing and role-playing video game released for the PC Engine in 1989, making its way over to the Turbografx 16 in 1990. In this game, the player is on a quest to live up to the reputation of his racing champion dad. He travels over the map, meeting small-time racers, and must race his car to earn money that he spends on upgrading his car, eventually facing the local racing champion. This game controls well if you're a fan of games like Pole Position. In fact, I found this game to be a bit easier than that one, but it all comes down to the story mode. I think having this involved story in a racing game is something that they should try to do again today, as it did keep me interested in this title for a bit longer than other racing games of this time period. Sadly, the visual style and the gameplay style are a bit dated, especially when compared to more modern racing titles. I would rate this at around a 7 out of 10, saying it's not a total loss, but definitely wasn't something that blew me away in terms of what a game could be on this system.
You know, racing games are actually kind of scarce on every console. There just aren't that many of them, at least at this time period. And I think that's a result of the fact that these consoles were not really equipped, at least the Turbografx for sure, was not really equipped to offer that 3D perspective that racing games require. Motor Rotor, that original launch title, was almost unplayable to me. And these two titles are definitely an improvement over that one, because it doesn't even attempt to do a 3D perspective in Motor Rotor. So if I were to recommend any racing games, I would start with Final Lap Twin, and then Chase HQ I just can't say anything about because I haven't personally played it. So even though this seems like we're ending on a low note, I really feel like sports titles are really meant to be enjoyed in the time they come out in, because the goal of every sports video game is to provide the most realistic experience possible on the hardware and capabilities of the time. And so that's why a lot of these haven't really dated well. The only sports games that I really feel like have dated well are ones that people find personally nostalgic, that they played when they were a kid and they want to play again now. Or they offer a gameplay style that is not as realistic for the sport, but the gameplay style designed for a video game console is actually addictive and fun to play, so those are the ones that have endured longer than anything else. For example, the game I always use for that is Punch-Out! It's meant to be a boxing game, but it doesn't play as a realistic boxing game, but it's so fun to play because it's a good video game. But that said, that is going to wrap up the HuCard games for the Turbografx 16, and that means in the next part in this series, we're actually going to shift over to the Turbografx CD, which I am covering in its own series of videos. So stay tuned for that coming out to you real soon. That said, I do want to thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for the Ultimate Turbografx CD review coming out to you real soon, and I will see you all in the next one.
If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.